Hey, what's up guys? Welcome back to the channel. So in today's video, we're going to be breaking down how to color grade log footage and standard footage for real estate videos. Let's get into it right now. So first, let's kind of establish the whole goal of color grading, whether it's standard, log, whatever type of footage. You basically just want your footage to look as natural as possible, not any sort of trendy or crazy edits. And there's a couple of different reasons to shoot standard or log footage, and so we'll get into that right now. Let's go into our first clip. Log footage is basically just like a really flat color profile that retains more data, typically more dynamic range than if it was shot standard. And now with the newer cameras, it's gotten a lot better because this footage is 10-bit from the Canon R6 that you're viewing right here on this clip. Basically, it retains a lot more data, a lot more color information, and it can hold up the grade like a lot better, a lot nicer. But before we start editing, I have to mention what you see here in my left-hand corner, and that's the scopes. For those of you that don't know, that's basically like a histogram, a map of your image, if you will. So here we can see that the blacks are basically starting at like 15 or so, and the whites, we're losing a little bit of data in the whites there, but I can bring it, and it's like barely any. And so basically what you want to do is get your scopes to look natural, which is going to be from like 0 to 100. So we have 100 up the top for the whites and then 0 for the blacks. Anything below that is going to be like losing detail. Same thing for the whites. So because it's shot in log, we have all that data available. So basically first I'm going to start by bringing my blacks all the way down, and I'm actually going to go past 0. I'll show you why in a second, because next I'm going to go to the whites, bring those up a bit, and as you can see, it brings the blacks back up. Bring them back down, bring up the whites like there. Okay, so next let's add in the contrast. So I'm going to, because it's log footage and I've messed with this a lot, I typically add anywhere from like 40 to 60 is kind of like a good starting point. Cool, that already is looking like so much better. And then we'll adjust the highlights and shadows. And so I think we're gonna bring up the shadows a bit to keep a little bit of the data from like the trees and such. And then the highlights, gonna bring them down because otherwise I can see we're gonna lose a lot in the clouds. And here's another point. So kind of like you want your main subject, which in this case is the house, you kind of want it to be in like the 60 to 80 range. That's kind of like a good exposure point. So this is already looking pretty good. You can turn the effects off right here. You can see that's before, that's after. So now what we're gonna do is we're gonna add saturation into it. And we basically, again, want it to look natural, but because this is real estate, we kind of want it to look like a little punchy. And so we don't want it to look desaturated, that looks weird. But then not overly saturated, like that's too much. But it looks like 150 is a good range. And so let me see. I'm looking at like the 60 to 80 range. I kind of want it to be right there. So I think bumping the exposure up just a little bit is what I needed. Now let's look at the blacks, make sure they're not like clipping too much. But honestly, I like bringing the blacks a little bit past 0 because it just makes them look nice and sleek for me personally. And sometimes, you know, it's kind of cool to just like take one of your sliders and move it up and down to see what it does. And so you can kind of see the effect that it's doing. So that already there looks really good. We can see that it's like, you know, a really properly exposed image. Looking at it, it looks really good. We can play it right here. Looks really nice, looks really natural. And so the only other thing I'm gonna do now that's missing for this clip is just correcting the white balance. So what I like to do is take the dropper right here and then just kind of click on a neutral surface. And because we have clouds in the shot, that's always a good reference point. So I clicked on that, it warmed up the image, added a little bit magenta, and now it looks like pretty good, pretty natural. And so make a little bit more fine-tune adjustments right here. Okay. So here we can play the whole clip back. Looks really good. Looks really good and natural to me. Turn the effect off, back on. Looks good. what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna copy this edit, and instead of starting from scratch on the next one, now I can just put it on here. So paste it. It looks perfect, looks really good. Honestly, we could not do anything else and this would look fine. Look, let me play it. Looks really natural. Here's before and after. Looks really good. Only thing I might do is maybe even bring the blacks down a little bit more, just for this section to look a little bit darker and sleeker. I mean, yeah, everything looks really nice. Maybe there's a little bit more wiggle room. So here's a good example. See how I'm bringing the highlights up and down? It goes from like 50 to like 80. Again, that 70 to 80 range just looks like really well exposed. So here, I'll play it. Looks awesome. Look, I can jump between the first clip. I'm actually surprised my computer's running this fine. Look at that. Looks really good, really natural. So that's a win. Check this out. This is shot on the Air2s. Yeah, I don't have one, but my friend Josh does. I have a Mavic Air 2, which I think is a great drone, but the Air2s is even more epic. This is, I think, 5.2 or 5.4K 30, which is ridiculous, and it's 10 bits, so it's even better. But I know now my fans are starting to turn on and such, but but I'm curious. Let's take the edit from this one and put it on here. You can see that the blacks aren't starting off really high up, so this might not work if I put it on there. Whoa, that looks terrible. Let's start from scratch on this one. But that's a good example of how you can see presets can work and also don't work, because for the same camera, it works great, but then putting on another camera that has a different log information, it's not gonna be the same. So we'll do this from scratch, but using the same formula. Bring down our blacks. Cool. Whites, because this is dust, you can tell that I'm not gonna have to bring the whites up too much. I really wanna retain a lot of that sunset. You'll see it come out here in a second. Shadows, let's see. Let's bring, oh yeah, we want some of that. What this needs is contrast and saturation. Now we can bring the shadows back. Let's see. It's kind of a weird shot to grade because it's like, because the sky's there, we really want to retain a lot of that data. But I just want to show you like a variety of clips, so. Cool. So here's before, after. Look at that. Looks pretty cool. Only thing I'm gonna do is I'm gonna warm this up to actually be enhanced because it's sunset, so it should be warmer. There's already a ton of green in this, so I don't really have like a neutral point to click on, so I'm gonna add some magenta in. Yeah, look at that. That looks really good. We even have more flexibility. Like if we want, we could retain a lot more of these shadows here. The blacks are still like, yeah, that's a good spot for them. Let's see with this contrast. Yeah. Now you can play it back. Looks awesome, looks good. Before, after. So here's a trick. I'm gonna, first of all, I don't like all this blue coming in right here. That might be like from my polarizer. And there's a lot of these oranges. And what we wanna do is just tone it down a little bit. Not manipulate it and change it crazy. And so if you go down to the curves section and then you bring your little eyedropper tool, you can select the color you wanna manipulate. And I'm on the hue versus saturation. And holding shift, I'm gonna hold the center right here. And then you can see you can change the saturation of a color. So I'm gonna just desaturate the blues just a tad bit. And I'm also gonna see how it looks if I select this orange and just ever so slightly desaturate it a little bit so it's not overpowering. So before, after, and before and after. So the whole clip still looks a little underexposed, so I'm still gonna probably bring this up a little bit more just by increasing the exposure. Like I think it should be there, yeah. And now let's play it back. Nice. Oh, and I remember why I didn't use this clip in the video, because the dog came in. So that looks pretty good. All right, next we have one more shot. This is a detail shot. So this is shot on the 50 and 1080 on the Canon R6. And again, I'm gonna take this edit, since we already made adjustments inside, and paste it on there. Okay, not bad. Let's reset our white balance, because I know it's gonna be different. And let's bring down the whites. Probably like right there. Blacks, let's see what's going on there. And you can tell that I'm going by the scopes like entirely. Like that's your most helpful guide ever. Shadows. Highlights retain a lot of that window detail, and then contrast. And then let's target something neutral, like maybe this light switch. Nice. Cool. Before, after. Looking at our scopes, looks really good. Let's play back. Now this is a perfect example of shooting log and how much more detail it retained. You can tell before we have the tree detail out the window, and then all of the detail for the inside, like the table section. So it just looks like such a more dynamic shot, and I love that. Looks really good and really makes your stuff look higher produced and higher end. So here outside, you can tell that everything is pretty well exposed, but check this out. Looking at our scopes, our whites are already totally clipped entirely. And you can see up here that there's like very little data. Like we can see some of the blues, and I think that's the polarizer, which was a big help. Always shoot with a polarizer inside and outside if I can. But if I go and bring these whites down, that data is just gone. You can see it's clipped on the scopes. Like even if I bring it down, it just wasn't recorded to begin with, because it just wasn't able to. I don't know what I was trying to say. If I was shooting this in log, I probably would have retained a lot of that detail even more in the sky, but not a big deal. So let me show you how I would go ahead and edit standard footage. So we can see that we can bring the blacks down a little bit here, and I'm actually gonna do the opposite. I'm basically gonna try and retain as much as I can from this clip already. So I'm gonna bring the highlights down, and I'm gonna bring the shadows up to make it more dynamic, and then compensate by like bringing in some contrast. And then this looks really desaturated, so let's bring in some saturation. Cool. And then bring down the whites a little bit, make sure the blacks are good, a little bit down. There we go. White balance, let's see if we click on one of these. Yeah, that looks pretty good. So now let's check it out. Nice. One of the things I noticed, a lot of it's exposed at the 70-60 range, so I'm actually gonna still have to bring up either the shadows or just the overall exposure like by 1. Probably like that, yeah. Because we don't want the house to look dark, so yeah, that looks pretty good there. So let's check before. That's before and after. So you can tell that we're not really color grading per se, we're just like adjusting pretty much as we can. And you can see that a lot of this is honestly done in just the basic correction, because we're not going to do stuff in the creative. The curves, I've showed you how you can kind of just desaturate or tweak your colors a little bit. We're not going to do any color wheels and adjustments in there, or HSL secondary, and obviously not vignetting. So a lot of it's just done in the basic panel. But we'll copy this and see if we can go and do it on our next clip. So this is a drone shot, and I was using the HDR mode, which is a standard color profile auto mode, and it just retains more detail that way. And it looks pretty good. Honestly, it just needs some tweaking, like some saturation and stuff, but you can tell that this is close to sunset, and you know, it's pretty cool. So let's paste this over. Nice. That already looks pretty good, honestly. Like what we want to do is enhance this sunset for sure, but let's see, bring our blacks down a little bit. I'm using an ND filter, so that maybe faded the blacks a bit. See how much of that whites we can retain. And then shadows. yeah. So here's another trick. We're gonna go into the curves and do the same thing we did for that inside shot. I'm gonna select these blues because it's like really cold and too oversaturated, and just desaturate them. Yeah, before, after. So now let's play it back. Let's see it warm it up a little bit. Looks really natural, looks really good. Okay, so this clip is shot with my 5D Mark IV on a 16-35 in 1080, and I'm using the HDR feature on it. And if you want to know more about that, I'll link up the video where I dive into using HDR for inside shots. But basically, standard footage is already colored. Unlike log, it's already colored and ready to go pretty much. All you can do is just do like slight adjustments in editing. And you can tell that, again, even using the HDR mode, those whites and the window detail is pretty much blown out. You can tell in the scopes, like there's not really no recovering any of that. So all we can do is kind of adjust as much as we can. So I'm gonna try and bring down the highlights, bring up the shadows to, again, bring the dynamic range up a little bit. And then let's see where these blacks are at, bring them down a little bit. The whites are already kind of blown. So just try and retain a little bit of that, but I don't want it to look faded. So again, looking at the bulk of this, it's at that like 40 to 70. I kind of want it to be a little bit higher. So let's see, bring up the exposure. It was underexposed a little bit, bring down the highlights. And yeah, that looks pretty good. Honestly, like it's not a big deal. This still could be, maybe bring up the shadows. You have to be careful because this is 8-bit footage, so shadows can fall apart a little bit easier, and your colors might not hold up as well, but that looks good to me, especially before and after. So check this out. One thing I'm gonna do is I'm gonna go to the curves again and select this like yellow white cast coming in, desaturate that a little bit, and just bring in the saturation to the overall image. Nice, just looks a little bit sleeker. So that was before and after. Looks pretty good. You have to be careful how much you pull those shadows. Let's try that again. Yeah, even that works. Not bad. Cool. Okay guys, so that pretty much wraps up this color grading video. I hope you guys enjoyed this and gained some insight into color grading, different types of footage, log, standard, different cameras. As you can see, not much goes into it. Just basic adjustments can pretty much get your footage to where you need it to be. So I've also gone ahead and created a preset pack for real estate color grading. The cool thing is we have different variations of different scenes in there. So we can have, there's some presets for exterior shots, interior shots, twilight exposures. It's cool because like you saw in here, you can pretty much drag and drop them. And the cool thing about the way I'm exporting these and putting them in my shop is when you download them and put them in Premiere, you can actually edit them. It's not just a LUT where you can adjust like the intensity of it. You can actually adjust all the basic adjustments and everything to tweak it so it looks good for your camera. So link in description to check that out. You'll be supporting me and my channel, so greatly appreciate it in advance if you pick those up. So that's pretty much it for this video, guys. Leave a like if you enjoyed, comment down your thoughts on real estate color grading, any other tricks and tips you like to do whenever you're editing your footage. Would love to know those. And subscribe if you haven't already. I would love you guys to be a part of my channel, and I'll see you guys in the next video. See ya.